Shavua Tov. This Wednesday night and Thursday, we're going to celebrate the most joyous holiday on the Jewish calendar, which is Purim. And we're going to read the story of the Megillah, the scroll of Esther. And there are four characters in the story. There's Mordechai, the righteous Jew, Haman, the wicked one, King Achashverosh, and there's Queen Esther. But here we find something interesting. Three of the characters remain static throughout the story. They don't change their behavior patterns. Mordechai is always the righteous one, Haman is always the wicked one, and Achashverosh is always the foolish king who is manipulated. As the Talmud says, first he kills his wife on account of his friend, and then at the end of the story he kills his friend on account of his wife. But there's one person who goes through a metamorphosis, a transformation, almost reinvents herself in the middle of the story, and that is Queen Esther. In the beginning of the story, we find Queen Esther to be a passive, timid young lady. She follows instructions. Her cousin Mordechai says, don't reveal your identity as a Jew. She doesn't reveal her identity. When she's taken to the beauty pageant, Haggai asks her, what do you want for your beauty, cosmetics, treatment? She says, I don't want anything. Her very name means Esther, Hiddenness. And when she's told to go intervene by her cousin to save the Jews, she's afraid. She says to her cousin Mordechai, how can I go to the king? I've not been summoned, and if the king doesn't extend his golden scepter, I can be killed. But suddenly she goes from being a passive person to being a proactive person. And that's when Mordechai says the following to her. Mordechai says, listen, Queen Esther, if you don't intervene to save the Jews, God will send salvation and deliverance from some other way, some other source. However, you and your family will be lost. And who knows? Maybe this is the whole reason you were chosen to be queen, to save the Jews. And at this point, Esther rises up and says to her cousin Mordechai, go gather the Jews, pray and fast for 3 days. I will fast as well. She starts calling all the shots. And she devises a brilliant strategy how to save the Jews by inviting Haman and Mordechai to the and Achashverosh to the party, not once but twice, until she is able to get the king to hang Haman. And here we see how in that moment of truth, when she realized that she's not a victim, but she was chosen for a mission, for a purpose. She was put in the position of queen to save the Jews. She discovers her voice and she discovers her identity as a Jew. And suddenly she acts with great passion, vigor, strength, and wisdom. And so to every single person, when we look at our life circumstances, we could think we're victims of circumstances, or we could say, no, God put me in this position to carry out my role and do my duty. There were many beautiful, heartwarming reunions in Israel as many Jews left war-torn Ukraine and escaped and came with their suitcase and their clothing on their back and arrived in Israel, the homeland, the Jewish homeland that welcomed them back home. But one of the most moving reunions was in Ukraine during World War II. There was a Jewish girl. Her name was Fanya Bass. And she was hidden by a righteous Ukrainian woman from the Nazis throughout the war. And she managed to survive the war and came to Israel. And she reported her story to Yad Vashem about this Ukrainian woman, Maria Blischik, who saved her life. And Yad Vashem nominated her as a righteous Gentile, a righteous woman of the world, of nations of the world, and planted a tree in her honor. Well, this woman, Fanya Bass, passed away. But her children kept in touch with the children of Maria Blischik, this Ukrainian woman who saved her life. And now the grandchildren have a relationship with their grandchildren. And when the war broke out in Ukraine, they immediately reached out to the grandchildren of this Ukrainian woman, Maria, and said, we want to bring you to Israel to rescue you from the war. And they went to the Israeli government and pleaded their case and filled out all the papers and cut through all the red tape. And then the granddaughter of Fanya Bass went to the grave of her grandmother in Israel and pray there for divine intervention and being able to return the favor, the kindness, and save the grandchildren of Maria, who saved her grandmother Fanya's life. And this week, a El Al flight landed in Ben Gurion Airport from Poland with two granddaughters of Maria Blischik, Lasia and Alona, who came down on the tarmac and were embraced by the grandchildren, the granddaughters of Fanya Bass. And with tears in their eyes, they hugged and embraced and kissed. And at that point, they looked at the grandchildren of Maria and they said, we are only able to rescue your life today because we are alive thanks to the virtues and the kindness of your grandmother. This is the story of the Jewish people today, looking around and coming together and saying, what can we do in this hour of crisis to help save our fellow Jews? This is our Esther moment in our modern